So, our last philosopher in this section on testimony and knowledge is J.L. Austin, born 1911, died 1960. Like I said, a lot of these guys, long lives or short lives. Austin had a unique convention of naming his works uh, with pithy titles. Um, One of his most famous works is known as How We Do Things with Words. Right? Um, and this is another good one is Three Ways to Spell Ink, where he talks about the relationship between intention and action. But How We Do Things with Words is a series of lectures that he gave on the subject of what are known as speech acts. Right? And this was Austin's idea that, and this is kind of a building in certain way of Grice's and a deviation from Grice's, H.P. Grice's intentionalist theory of meaning and others. Right? Um, but the idea of a speech act is that utterances, right, our use of language have performatory function. Right? They actually are performances of meaning. It's not just that meaning is in use. Meaning, words themselves can change the state of affairs of the world. Right? They are similar to like plays in a sense that they, uh, and the world is their stage where they put on a performance. Right? Um, there is a function of language according to speech act theory, and therefore of communication that allows words to do things. Right? Language isn't just referring to the world; it can change the states of affairs of the world. Now, there are three types of speech acts. Right? There is the locutionary speech act, which is what an utterance means. This is locutionary. Locutionary speech acts are literal. This is equivalent to Grice's, or roughly equivalent to Grice's understanding of saying something being what's directly uttered. Then there is illocutionary speech acts. Um, and these are what an utterance's meaning constitutes, right? Implications that go beyond what's directly stated. Right? Again, just like Grice's notion of implication. So illocutionary is implicative in nature, locutionary is literal in nature, and then we have perlocutionary. And perlocutionary speech acts are how an utterance's meaning has causal efficacy on an interpreter's actions. Right? Put another way, it is the ability of language, when used in this way, to do something practical, to have an effect that changes the state of affairs in the world. Right? It's the ability of language to do things, right? Rather than merely say and speak and imply things. Right? So some examples of this would be promising, giving consent, marrying someone. Right? Right? In the case of marrying someone, or in the case of promising and consent, we can see that perlocutionary speech acts, this understanding of language is really important and has a lot of moral dimensions to it. Language has moral dimensions to it. Not just in the form of like racial slurs and being kind to others, but literally we can create moral elements with the use of language. A promise doesn't exist until a promise is given and you know, accepted by the one to whom it's given. Right? Similarly, right, you don't get married just by, getting up there and saying, I do. Right? Marriage is a legal institution. Right? It's a one that's granted under the authority of the state. You have to sign a marriage license before you can get married, and that's where you legally get married, right? But the whole performance is a matter of the whole performance of marriage in front of others, right? It's not you who says saying I do who marries. That's you making a vow, right? In sickness and in health, and for better or for worse, richer or poorer, till death do you part, right? I do, right? That's promising all those things to the other person. Marriage is basically just a mutual promise, if that's all there is to it, right? And divorce is agreeing that you want out of being held accountable for that promise. Right? You want to be released from that promise before death do you part. It's the pastor or officiant who says, by the power invested in me, I now pronounce you man and wife, or man and man, or wife and wife, or in Alabama, kin. Right? It's a matter of functionally the power being granted, by the marriage being granted to you by someone with the power, similar to how a ship's captain, you know, is the one who names the ship, right? And there are whole ceremonies, traditions that go behind it. Right? The christening of a ship in the old days involved smashing a bottle of wine over the hull, right? And it was the captain who had to do it. And that's how the ship was officially named. Even if it was given that name beforehand, it did not actually bear the name until the captain christened the ship. Right? That's one such version. So language has a whole multitude of power. Right? How can it be possible outside of perlocutionary speech acts for language for promise to mean something if it doesn't affect a change in the world? Right? So meaning isn't just restricted to language and its use. Language use can change the meaning of the states of affairs in the world. Right? Uh, that's another quandary, I suppose, and it's an interesting point to leave off on. Um, in ethics, we discuss this part more. If you're interested, well, those videos are also available on this channel. It would be week 13 for philosophy 2306.